July 1998, Raccoon City. Alpha Team is flying around northwest Raccoon City, where we're searching for the 8-bit helicopter of our compatriots Bravo Team, who disappeared during the middle of our gaming session. Bizarre copyright violations have recently occurred in Raccoon City. There are outlandish reports of families being approached by a group of about 10 salesmen. Victims were apparently sold bootleg cartridges. Bravo Team went into the hideout of the group and disappeared. Chris, you haven't found the bootleg? Oh, I have, and you're not gonna believe this. The original Resident Evil is a veritable monolith in the landscape of survival horror, responsible for shipping millions of brand new PlayStations straight from store shelves and into the homes of 90s gamers. The game stands wholly apart from the rest of its survival horror peers as a shining example of the brilliance that can only be achieved with subtlety and deliberation, forcing players to double and triple check their every move in anticipation of some new horror that's waiting just around the corner. While the game's potential was certainly restricted by a bevy of technological limitations, Capcom managed to wring every ounce of tension possible, mostly by using some clever tricks, like the fixed camera angles which constantly keep you on your toes, always wondering if there's someone or something behind you. Fortunately, game developers would soon be spared from wrestling with the PlayStation 1's limitations in 2000 after the arrival of 6th generation consoles like its successor, the PlayStation 2. At this juncture, the world was well into the 3D era. There was no need to play with pre-rendered backgrounds or wonky tank controls, thanks to significantly faster processors, increased memory capacities, and some standardization. But in a certain part of the world, gaming had flash frozen over a near decade. The name of this place? What, you don't know? It's in the title! While Japan, America, and Europe were well into the 6th console generation, China stuck its feet firm in the past with 8-bit Famicom clones ruling dominant. Despite rapid economic growth during the 90s, the average Chinese family had to fork over nearly a quarter of their monthly income just to afford a new Sony toy. As if this wasn't enough, the Chinese government enacted a complete ban on foreign game consoles beginning in 2000. It wouldn't be lifted for over 10 years. China created a massive void and an even bigger entertainment industry that serviced over 1 billion people, nearly a quarter of whom were under 15. On top of all that, draconian censorship laws prohibiting depictions of blood, gore, and sensual material made it nearly impossible for foreign game publishers to navigate through the Chinese gaming market, which had fast become a labyrinthine minefield. As a result, local companies rose to the occasion and provided Chinese gamers with solutions that would slip past the prying eyes of censorship bureaus without burning a hole in their wallets. An excellent example of this ingenuity is Biohazard, the Chinese demake of Capcom's Resident Evil for the NES. For the unaware, a demake sounds exactly like what it is. It's taking a game and recreating it in a much simpler way so that it can run on older technology. It's usually taking a 3D game and making it 2D. Resident Evil on the PS1 famously uses 3D models in a pre-rendered world. However, Biohazard for the NES, as you can imagine, is a completely 2D pixel experience capable of running on the much older and outdated hardware. If you've ever played Resident Evil Gaiden for the Game Boy Color, the gameplay is a repurposing of that game's mechanics. If you are unaware of Resident Evil Gaiden, the Game Boy Color obviously has pretty similar limitations to the NES in terms of not being able to render the high quality 3D visuals of the PS1. In order to create a Resident Evil game for the Game Boy Color, the scope had to be sized down appropriately. The game plays in a top-down perspective as you explore the evil residents. However, instead of blasting zombies away immediately, when you run into a zombie, you are taken into a kind of like first-person battle screen with a moving bar in the middle. In order to deal damage to the zombie, you have to basically hit your attack button right when the bar is in the middle. It's a pretty familiar minigame to gamers that ends up being a pretty fun, if somewhat repetitive, answer to the hardware limitations. Biohazard uses the same gameplay system to deliver an experience that is both faithful to the original Resident Evil while streamlining certain elements to skirt around the limitations of ancient hardware. Ironically, Biohazard is what Resident Evil is called in Japan. Due to their geographical proximity, a lot of Chinese bootlegs simply copied the Japanese Famicom instead of the American NES. Who do we have to thank for the combo of this Chinese hardware and Japanese aesthetics? Wysing, a game studio infamous for classics such as Journey to the West and Aladdin 2. Both of which ripped off from the original Famicom games and were plagued with issues ranging from awful hit detection to janky controls. Though, Biohazard should be no different, right? Well, Wysing hit the proverbial nail on the head by limiting their demake scope down to just one playable character, Jill, and removing a couple of boss fights. I feel that this was a good choice because developers trying to tackle too much is what tends to lead to an inevitable plethora of bugs and glitches. Plus, I feel that the combat does get pretty repetitive after a while, so I'd much rather the game not overstay its welcome. Furthermore, the smaller scope also allows the game to be small enough to fit on the NES cartridge size limit of 1 megabyte. Crazy how much we used to be able to fit in such a tiny space. In any case, most of the heavy lifting for Biohazard's gameplay was done by the excellent Gaiden engine, which is probably why the game is surprisingly glitch-free. But Wysing must be commended for their incredible attention to detail. From the iconic intro scene, recreated entirely in 2D, to the spooky mansion interior the player must survive, Biohazard's 8-bit rendition of the Resident Evil 1 experience is both meticulous and incredibly unique. No one has really managed to replicate something similar on NES hardware, as far as I'm aware at least. Now, if you're for some reason interested in shopping for a physical copy of the game, how would you tell the bootleg apart from the original? Well, the cartridge should immediately stand out by pure virtue of, well, being a cartridge. Try sticking that in your PS1. Oh, and on the label, Jill Valentine is wearing her Resident Evil 3 outfit for some reason instead of her STARS uniform. I guess Wysing maybe had a preference? Anyway, Once you plug this odd-looking cartridge into your Famicom, you'll be greeted with an epic 2D slideshow of expository dialogue detailing the events that led up to our beloved Alpha team getting trapped inside the Spencer mansion on that ill-fated July night. All the while, your ears are treated to the blaring orchestra of 8-bit music as loud as it lacks harmony. The intro sequence from the original Resident Evil felt very unsettling and mysterious, like you were about to plunge into a nightmarish world filled with horrifying creatures. Entering the mansion in the PS1 game felt like trapping yourself in a somewhat claustrophobic world, which creates an amazing atmosphere for horror enjoyers. I feel that Biohazard on the NES didn't quite perfectly recreate that atmosphere, but it does something pretty uniquely different. I would describe the atmosphere of Biohazard NES as actually kind of laid back. It's not that difficult to avoid encounters when you don't want to tussle with a zombie, so there isn't that same kind of frantic anxiety of wondering if you should use your limited ammo or not. The game gives you a surplus of ink ribbons for the game's limited save system. It just doesn't really invoke that same anxiety that Resident Evil does. However, I feel that Biohazard NES does still overall capture the spirit of the original, as it encourages exploration and problem solving without getting too bogged down by its technological restraints. The puzzles are pretty straightforward for the most part, and navigating the mansion gets easier over time. The inventory system and health monitor are perfectly carried over, and Jill's icon is an 8-bit render of her Star's ID card photo from the original. Plus, the game does still include those iconic scenes such as Kenneth of the Bravo team getting his corpse devoured by a zombie right as Jill steps into the room. Whenever you come across a zombie, Biohazard will put you in a first-person sequence where you land hits by matching your input timing with an oscillating marker, which swings from one side of the screen to the other. Jill wildly flailing her arms in terror while having to time the exact moment at which her crosshair matches up. The system is copied directly from Resident Evil Gaiden, and it works pretty well, even though it can get a bit repetitive after a while. All things considered, it's a pretty creative way of managing zombie fights and creating a level of tension while adhering to the limits of NES hardware. Do you let the zombies get close and personal for a better hit chance? Or do you wear them down from a distance, potentially wasting ammo in exchange for saving more health points? Biohazard's hit meter is smaller for targets that are farther away, and they creep up on you frame by frame as time passes. It's like a scene from a horror movie where you're staring directly at the ghost, and it vanishes with each flicker of the light, getting closer and closer until it's staring you right in the face. Wah! Biohazard doesn't force fights upon you. If you're tactful, you can slither past the mansion's Walking Dead to get to your objectives without firing a single shot. Just like the original, this is survival horror. It's about conserving what scarce resources you chance upon from time to time, and balancing risk against reward. From a core gameplay perspective, this is as close as you can get to Resident Evil 8-bit hardware. It's amazing that Weixing pulled it off so well despite such huge system limitations. Puzzles have also been recreated in a way that mirrors the original experience as well. Now, in a coat of Famicom paint. For instance, Biohazard features the entire laboratory computer bit from the original. You know, where you type in a login ID and password to unlock certain doors. Biohazard can be a treat for speedrunners and short session gamers alike. The whole bootleg can be completed in just under 1 hour, I even accidentally found a bug that lets you completely skip the Plant 42 boss fight. In any case, you get the final tyrant fight, the helicopter extraction, and all the important plot points compressed into a short and sweet campaign. We also get to see that awesome ending in which Jill is resting her head on the reassuring shoulder of everyone's favorite boulder punching dude, Chris. Okay, that's RE5, which came out way after this demake, but there is a relevant sequel I've already mentioned. Since the bootleg was created after Resident Evil 3, its epilogue actually mentions the Raccoon City incident in which Jill was sent to investigate its zombie outbreak. Now that's something I promise you won't find in the original, given 1996's Capcom probably had no clue their risky venture would become an overnight sensation, spawning a global franchise with millions of fans, some passionate enough to even take the series into their own hands. Though, it's faithful, it's well put together, and you can even play it with an English translation. What more could you want from a demake? While preserving a unique identity, both timeless and refreshing, to me, Biohazard is more than just another bootleg. It symbolizes a kind of endurance in the face of overbearing regulations, brilliance undeterred by the lack of resources, and most importantly, our collective desire as gamers to enjoy what we respect, irrespective of socioeconomic factors. For those less well off in the 1990s and early 2000s China, it would have been near impossible to play original PlayStation or Nintendo games. And post 2000, even if you were financially privileged, the government had simply now banned all foreign game consoles. On top of that, there pervaded a certain type of social stigma associated with kids who played video games. Parents believed they would somehow turn their children into delinquents, that video games were little more than distractions from studies and a path toward ruin. And it wasn't just that the games were too expensive. A lot of households just couldn't afford a genuine PlayStation 2 or GameCube, many resorting to producing bootlegs of both new games and reskinned copies of retro ones. Infamously in China, there's this Famicom clone, Famiclone, known as the Red and White Bisuiter. It actually cost just a fraction of an actual Famicom system, and it could play any Famicom cartridge to boot. For many kids, this was the best gift that they could receive from their parents, as it meant they could play some video games. I personally view bootlegs of old games as a portal into a different time and place. A way to enjoy games that may not be readily available to you, whether it's due to financial restrictions or government restrictions. Bootlegs tend to not only be more accessible, but also more affordable, while offering a unique experience different from the original. And that's certainly one of the many benefits to bootlegging. It's a way to present gems to a brand new audience. I see bootlegging as a side of the modding community more than anything, because at the end of the day, bootlegs tend to have a basis on some pre-existing game. Through technical finagling, the game is taken and given some kind of unique spin. In the modding community, some fans make unofficial adaptations of their favorite games with modified levels, new characters, and/or new music. Some make their own expansions. Old region-locked games, once exclusive to their individual nations, now have fan translations that take a lock and pick to screw the whole thing, tearing open portals for new audiences. Gamers go to great lengths to cherish and celebrate their childhood experiences. They'll even put themselves through the arduous task of creating translations for titles so others can enjoy themselves regardless of barriers. Sometimes, in order to break that barrier, though, something more than just a language translation is needed. Biohazard was created by Weixing as a translation of not just language, but also accessibility to the Chinese public. Modding, translating, and bootlegging are all ways for fans to create a community where barriers fall and players take works into their own hands and make their own versions, kind of like a DJ producing a remix. Bootlegging is the basis of modding and has inspired countless gamers to even transition into game development of their own, armed with experience and insight born from the long hours modding, adjusting, and tinkering. The cycle continues. Still, not all bootlegs are made with the same attention to detail put into them. Like I mentioned before, even Weixing's own catalog is full of buggy re-releases. Because bootleg games are totally unlicensed and unmoderated, there's no overarching quality control, for better or for worse. Due to the lack of copyright restrictions, it's possible for developers to create their own unique spins on beloved IPs such as Biohazard Nest. However, there are also times where a bootleg ends up just being a disproportionate Pikachu walking around in a Smurfs village where an enemy just appearing on screen makes the game suddenly run at maybe 4 FPS. Still, I don't believe that the lack of quality control taints the overall value of bootlegging at all. A majority of these bootleg games sell for pebbles. Even if a person had the misfortune of picking up a buggy, borderline unplayable mess of a game, I think that it still provides a level of entertainment. At the very least, a funny, unbelievable story to share about playing a game where Mario forgets the pipes and princesses to follow his Italian roots and deliver pizza. Lots of people may ask, why has bootlegging persisted for so long, despite the considerable efforts by game studios and publishers to clamp down on this phenomenon through increasingly pervasive anti-piracy regulations? The answer, in my opinion, is that bootlegs, despite their dubious legality, provide an outlet for gamers to preserve and cherish experiences that would otherwise be unattainable or inaccessible. Sometimes, the only way to play a game you really like is by bending the rules. While regulatory bodies such as governments under the guise of protecting the youth make video games inaccessible, bootleggers exist to preserve the best interests of underprivileged gamers. Bootlegging can be a monument to the passion of fan communities and a treasure trove of free expression filled with content made by fans for fans. Ultimately, the journey from Resident Evil to Biohazard on the NES unveils a captivating tale of ingenuity and preservation within the world of bootleg gaming. As we delve into the 8-bit realm of Raccoon City, we witness the emergence of a unique adaptation. This unauthorized demake not only defies technological limitations, but also stands as a testament to the resilience of gaming communities facing economic challenges and governmental restrictions. Biohazard, with its 2D pixelated charm, offers a distinctive experience faithful to the original Resident Evil. Despite the hardware restraints, Weixing adeptly navigated the labyrinth of limitations, delivering a reimagining that mirrors the iconic horror of the Spencer Mansion. The mirror may have its smudges, but those smudges give it character. The game's strategic approach to combat, cleverly adapted from Resident Evil Gaiden, introduces a level of tension while honoring the NES hardware. This bootleg becomes more than just a replication. It serves as a symbol of endurance against overbearing regulations, and showcases brilliance undeterred by resource scarcity. In the context of 90s and early 2000s China, where foreign game consoles were both financially and legislatively out of reach, Biohazard emerged as a beacon of accessibility for gamers eager to explore the horror-filled world of horror survival gaming. Moreover, the broader discussion on bootlegging transcends Biohazard's narrative. Delving into the global gaming landscape, bootlegs act as portals to bygone eras, providing access to games that might be otherwise unavailable due to financial constraints or government restrictions. These unauthorized adaptations, though lacking in quality control, contribute to the rich tapestry of gaming history, offering affordable and accessible alternatives that resonate with diverse audiences. As we consider the persistence of bootlegging despite anti-piracy efforts, I think it becomes evident that these endeavors can be driven by a genuine desire to preserve and share beloved gaming experiences. Whether reliving childhood memories or breaking down socioeconomic barriers, bootlegging is an integral part of the gaming community's commitment to free expression and shared passion. In essence, from the shadows of Resident Evil to the pixelated brilliance of Biohazard, this Chinese bootleg tale not only underscores the adaptability of gaming, but also prompts contemplation on the delicate balance between preserving fan-driven expression and respecting intellectual property rights. As we navigate this intricate terrain, Biohazard stands as a captivating chapter in the evolving story of gaming subcultures, where creativity thrives, even in the face of adversity. Thank you so much to my patrons for supporting this video and future releases. Thank you, thank you, thank you!